Welcome to the Executive Lounge, the business leadership program that brings you nuggets and insights from captains of industry, men and women who have scaled the daunting hurdles of managing and growing enterprises in different sectors of our economy. Today we are joined by a business executive who has exemplified himself beyond the world of zeros and ones and the coding languages of software development. Kofi Dadzie is an award-winning software developer, a father, a husband, and CEO of Roncat, a major player in the software market in Ghana and across the globe. Prior to co-founding Roncat, Kofi worked with a number of major technology companies in the US, including Dell Computer Corporation. As an analyst at Dell in the biotechnology team, he filed a patent, which he will tell us more about in a moment. Radiant Systems is also another organization that he worked in, as well as Whirlpool Corporation. Kofi serves as a director of Roncat Solutions Limited and is a fellow of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, as well as the African Leadership Initiative, and has served on the Ashesi University Corporate Advisory Council. He has a computer engineering degree from Vanderbilt University in the United States of America. In 2015, he made Ghana's top 20 most influential business leaders under 40. Welcome to the Executive Lounge, Kofi Dadzie.
Thank you very much, Inshira.
Let's meet Kofi the boy. What was it like growing up?
Well, there are two themes that I remember were very much in our home growing up. And they've pretty much persisted through my life. One was really about surrounding yourself with smart people who are smarter than you, because then there's always something to learn from them. And the other was an attitude which you could not have. That is the one in which we tend to express the phrase, I can't do this, right? And so I'll talk about the first. The first of, regarding surrounding yourself with smart people. Well, I was lucky to have been the third out of 4 children. So I had these 2 older sisters who are still among the smartest people I know. So let's say I was first of all thrust into a little world where I was surrounded by smart people, so maybe that gave me the comfort to continue doing that. So in school, my friends tended to be the smartest kids in the class, and I just learned to enjoy being around people who just know so much more than you do and are great to engage and naturally learn from. My sisters were bookworms. And so not only were they smart, but they were just full of knowledge, liked learning, and it was just always, there was just always something else to get from them. I didn't pick up on some of these qualities till later, but they definitely fed and influenced the boy I was growing up to be. My parents introduced this I can't attitude, right? I mean, to the point that if you asked my mother for something, if you were making a request and she was going to decline, and you said, Mommy, can I have? Her answer would be, yes, you can, but you may not. I mean, so even in a scenario like that, there wasn't going to be you can't. No, you can. You can do everything. You can have everything, but in this case, you may not. But also what was intriguing growing up was that my parents interacted with me like an adult. And I've learned, raising children of our own, that when you do that, children just grow up more confident, faster and smarter. So my father, who is an ophthalmologist and was also partly a research scientist because he was working on trying to eradicate onchocerciasis, river blindness, would talk to us about his work as though we went to school with him and we sat in his office with him. He wouldn't dumb it down because we were kids. Rather, he would build us up to understand it at that level. So at a very young age, I knew that river blindness was caused by the black fly with the scientific name Onchocerca volvulus, and then deposited the microfilaria. And I knew all of this as a 4 and 5-year-old, and I understood it. And he'd show us the pictures of them going out doing the vector control with the helicopters. And so you were thrust into this adult world where you were challenged to just build your capacity to understand and engage. To the point that we drank my father's beer with him. What did that mean? We didn't learn about alcohol from irresponsible people. So I've never been drunk in my life because my introduction to the challenging things of the adult world were done in a way that allowed me to learn and grow with them. It was the same with my becoming saved as a Christian. I was born again formally at the age of 9. And I understand the complex things of God between the age of 9 and 11, 12, 13, 14, things that adults grappled with, I understood simply. And that's what growing up was like. There are times when I wish, maybe romantically, that I had a bit more of my childhood in my childhood. But I was challenged to as some people put it, think big at a really young age. And just being surrounded by adults, engaging them openly, but also being surrounded by smart kids, right? Kids who just knew more than you did. My sisters primarily, older cousins and so on. That's what growing up really was like for me.
That's quite interesting because this predates Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, and he shares a very interesting concept that he calls concerted cultivation, where there's a deliberate attempt or a plan to raise children in a certain way so they become more confident and have the can-do spirit. How did that influence your path that you chose in the end to go into software development? You and the computer, how did that come about?
Yeah, that came right from home. I remember in about 1983 or 1984 when my father first bought an Atari 600 XL, brought it home. Well, of course, our inclination was then to play on it. There was an ET phone home game and a couple other games. But then I remember my mother was looking at the concept of programming. So she actually brought home books teaching how to write BASIC, and she started teaching herself. And again, that was really interesting. My mother taught us to swim, but apparently couldn't swim herself. So there was this, if there's something out there and it's good to do it, figure it out, right? So my two older sisters both went to engineering school. And went to my older sister, did computer systems engineering at the time, was this about 1992, at a time when, especially around us, it wasn't the field that everybody was being smart, especially smart kids were being encouraged to do. So I thinking back a little bit, there was a bit of discouragement at the time. This is what you should be doing, shouldn't you be going to be a doctor or something else? And she's like, no, this is what I'm going after. Then my sister, whom I'm immediately after, also went in and did electrical and electronic engineering and pursued that to a master's and a PhD and so on. So again, I mean, these are the two people I grew up really close looking up to, right? It was almost, and what they'd share when they came back home really piqued my interest. I mean, I remember my older sister had this Akai mini hi-fi player, and it had this DSP note on it, and she started explaining to me what digital signal processing was about and how the quality of music that she could play from this device was enhanced by the particular electronic hardware in it. Because it did digital signal processing, it would pick out the high fidelity from the instruments in terms of the recording and the playback and all. And this was just very intriguing because she was making it all very common and practical. And so some of these things just piqued my interest, and I said, well, I think I like the idea of this world of computers that's influencing even the quality of music we listen to. And that led me, even though my inclination at the time was I wanted to be in the world of cars and automotive engineering. I mean, but that's where my inclination to go to computer engineering came from, and that led me to a whole different world from where I had originally started, where my interests originally were.
That's some great stuff. I mean, so you then co-founded Roncat Solutions and or Roncat. In this period, you initially rolled out a platform which was well ahead of its time.
That's right. So, I mean, following the theme of surrounding yourself with smart people, so I met my co-founder, Ehi Nachimota. I'm talking about, and not just smart people smarter than yourself. I remember he's the person who taught me calculus. So now we very early defined what we wanted to do and be. our definition of what has become our mission and vision in Roncat wasn't as clearly spelled out, but we clearly understood it, and we expressed what we're trying to build. And so it was two things. It was enterprise applications, so being able to give world-class, complex software that could work easily for medium and smaller businesses, which are the majority of what we find in our environment. We started in Accra, though we, over the years, rolled out our software to other territories. But we're looking at our local market. Mm-hmm. And I think it's key to have a grasp of your local market and bring what it is you're doing to it. So the challenge was, how do we take this nascent web? And maybe it wasn't so much the web that was nascent in 2001 when we started, but connectivity, was dial-up at the time. Mm-hmm. How do we begin to extend this so that the average medium to small business in Ghana can access the complex software they need to make their business operations more efficient? How do we serve the same thing that big companies, multinationals can have in the form in which small businesses can have it? How do we deliver it over the web? And then there was communication applications. There, very early as 2001, I remember it was November, we built and launched what you call a carrier class mobile gateway. Carrier class means a mobile gateway that a whole telco would deploy and use at scale. It's interesting. So at that time, open source software frameworks we used turned out to be the same that was being deployed worldwide in all the companies in Europe and in America and in Asia that we encountered later on as we were going up the ladder of deploying in mobile networks.
Wow.
And the fact that many of them were incorporated around about the same year as we were, and were using basically similar frameworks, building out similar stuff. You earlier alluded to Malcolm Gladwell. Yes, it is very consistent. When you look at certain breakthroughs that emerge in certain times and eras, you will find that there is a certain consistency of which people happen to lead those. Perhaps the only mistake we made then was that our local market wasn't ready and we should have moved. And then maybe come back when our local market was ready. But some of the things we started very early that were globally relevant at the time, we didn't have the infrastructure locally to meet, and so we had to shelve those and then sort of, for lack of a better expression, dump it down to what the market could meet. And those were some of the challenges, but also the wins we started very early with.
But you started on a pretty good note. Albeit that you may look back and say, you could have gone global with your initial carrier class gateway, but you didn't. But beyond that, you still, off the back of that, when the market had come around and had met your technology, you were able to scale and go across several different territories. What was it like going across different territories with an idea or a product that you had developed here in Ghana?
It was interesting. I think the need to be excellent first right where you are was what counted most, because it meant then we had a case study, a testimonial to meet the opportunity when it presented itself. Back in the day, 2007, 2008, the Google team came around Africa and was looking for who are the local technology players we can build up and scale with. We had the evidence to show. What was enjoyable from there was when they took our technology and extended it into other regions of the world where there are players like us they could have used, but that was right there, evidence that they found our technology and our delivery to be world-class, which is what we set out to do from the beginning, to build technology, to build a company, to build the evidence that right in Africa, Africans can build world-class companies, and defining that by saying it will be classified by the world. We can all say what we do is world-class, but sometimes you need to test it and get the evidence. And that could be a path that could demonstrate to others in our generation and after us that, look, there's no reason to restrict and restrain what our visions are. That we can really go the ways of the Microsofts and Sonys and Dells and Intels of this world if we only start with that intent and stick to a set of values at the core of which is excellence.
You talked about dumbing down the technology at the time that the market was not ready for, or the infrastructure didn't support it. So that means you would have to innovate based on what you found to be the predominant need of the market at the time. What did you find, and how did you go about ensuring that you would remain relevant and competitive in that space?
Right. That's been one of the challenges that I have found we will continue to encounter actually in any market. So initially I said dumbing down, but the truth was being relevant. And so depending on where you start and how you frame what you're doing and what you're trying to deliver in the market, it may appear as though being relevant means scaling back the level of complexity or what you thought the market could take at the time. But the key is being relevant. Then to your point, you innovate so that you are really relevant, because there is a bar, there is a benchmark, there is always competition, there's always something that precedes what you tend to offer the market. And so being relevant must be benchmarked to it. Well, so one of the telcos we started doing business in early, deployed our software in back in the day, was Mobitel, just before it became Tigo. And one of the things we built there early, and that began to build our track record as being can-do engineers, innovative from Roncat, was that the billing systems that are available today, the intelligent network systems that lend themselves to third-party service billing, were now coming to market. And so weren't pervasive in the telcos as they are today. So you had to find ways to do dynamic billing. So we're deploying a software platform so that other content providers in the market could price things differently, and based on what a subscriber selected, could automatically bill. So at the time, we built a software matrix, throw in a number of short codes, ask the telco to configure a price differently on each one, and then our software would make the decision dynamically based on what a content provider's catalog had. They could set the prices. Before, they couldn't set varying prices dynamically. The capability still wasn't there in the telco, and we showed how we could bring software to understand the dumb side of things and to extend the intelligent side of things and make it easy so that more providers out there could do what they do best and use it. And that's sort of been our mantra. It was, how do you bring smart technology in an efficient way so that small and medium companies can access it in an easy way without having to learn new skills, without having the typical cost barrier it would take, and just get them to scale up. And that's what we continue to seek to do, is to make people smarter, make companies smarter through simple technology interfaces that hide away but enhance the complexity of the technology that needs to be behind it. Put simply, it's being relevant.
That is impressive, and look where that got you. We're going to take a short break. When we come back to the Executive Lounge, we will be exploring what it takes to be fit for purpose at Roncat, and how a vision that started between two friends in school has evolved into what it is today. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Executive Lounge with me, Inshira Addo, and today we're talking to the CEO of Roncat, Kofi Dadzie. Earlier on, we learned about how the vision of Roncat was crafted in school when he met his co-founder, and all of that is history now, as they say. But what does it take to work for Roncat? What type of a person works for Roncat, Kofi?
That's a good question, and over the years we've done series of work, both informal and formal, trying to define it in the way we interview, in the way we do orientation sessions, but most importantly, in what we reward and what we, I know what the word is, the disreward word. And ultimately, the person has to be an innovator. And that has nothing to do with engineering per se, but it's got to do with a mindset that says, I find ways to get things done well. They have to have integrity. There's just no room. And what we've learned over the years is that integrity is a powerful and lasting currency. It gets to a point where you win stuff, whether it's opportunities, business, engagements, relationships, simply because people say these people can be trusted, and that integrity is something you constantly work at. But basically you do everything in your power to do what you say you will do, and when you can't, you're proactive about communicating that. And just being reliable. We don't forgive unreliability. We just don't pardon that easily. that you follow through and you find ways to deliver on what your promises are. And we've defined our company around that. But we've learned that, look, you define these things, you try to create what you call a corporate culture, but ultimately it has to become the personal values of the people who work in it at every level. And at every level, you're an example to the people above you, the people at your level, the people who are working for you. And so there's this 360 active culture that we have to constantly be measuring. It's one thing to say this is what you are, but you've got to test it and see. Yeah. So some of the best tests we've had were when we were going through our first formal institutional investment round, where naturally investors will do a thorough due diligence, which includes going to some of your key customers without you being there and just ask them to give a testimony of what their experience working with you has been. And everybody knows it won't all be perfect, but there was this consistent, resounding feedback of trust. And in fact, in many cases, that stood out even more than our engineering prowess. And we've just learned that the only way you maintain that and you grow with that is that you get that imbibed in the people, but that you also find people who embody and embrace those characters already. The extent to which you're able to measure that before somebody is working intimately with you is always a little less than what you can measure after. So having in place structures and systems where people who don't really embrace these values find their way out efficiently.
Yeah. You know, there's the thought that a lot of Fortune 500 companies or any business that will transcend different generations and remain relevant is only able to do so when they live by the core values. And you've set yours out. But I'm sure over the years, since 2001, which is about 16 years now,
yes.
You've had different phases of people come through the organization. How are you able to ensure that, one, you're hiring the right people, and when they arrive, they are not bringing a culture that dilutes what you have, and that they're able to adopt what you have and keep it going, so that you consistently deliver the things that you set out to do?
This may not come out sounding right initially, but I think it's a clear illustration. You have to have a system that does not get constipated, because actually you can't guarantee that you always get your hiring right. And then you have periods in business, especially as a small and growing business, where you will consistently get it wrong, especially when you are in mid-transition points where you need to grow, but you don't have the resources to pace it and hire properly, and you haven't learned the right things, and so you're just consistently hiring wrong because of a bit of desperation to get people in, or you're losing people and you're trying to replace. So you need to have this anti-constipation pill, which says some of what you bring in has to go out, and you can't have a system that doesn't know how to get out what must go. But Jim Collins frames it best in Built to Last, where he talks about this cult-like culture these great organizations must have. It's not a cult, it says cult-like, where the culture is so deeply embedded that it's just seamless across the organization. So some people come in, they all have good intentions. Having to have some people go out doesn't mean they are bad people. It's all about fit, right? I mean, so we all don't fit in certain places, right? And you don't have to even push them out. It's that the culture is so almost antagonistic to the way they'd like to operate that they themselves find their way out. And so that's the epitome of where you want to be, where you've so deeply rooted the way in which you operate, behave, literally almost the way you talk, react, that people who don't fit that, who don't identify with it, tend to find their own path out. But ultimately, you can't afford constipation. You won't always get it right coming in, so you've got to have a system that continuously evaluates what fit is and continuously separates those that must stay from those who need to move on and find opportunities elsewhere.
You come across as a pretty nice guy, but you're also saying all of this constipation theory with a lot of conviction. So is it always about the business? Because there are days where you have to deal with flushing out people, but there's a human face to this. Cite an example of a day in your life as CEO that was like really difficult, that you needed to do something. How did you deal with that kind of a thing?
The Navy SEALs have this saying that goes something like, the only easy day was yesterday. Difficult day, that's every day. It's just what part of the day was more difficult than the other part. I say to people that if you're an ER doctor, if that's your training, that's your calling, that's what you do, you don't go to work praying, God, don't let anybody have an emergency today. Right? So you've just got to prepare yourself to go and do what you have to do. And you just keep learning. So that what's important is that when you have to take the difficult decisions that concern people, hopefully that they realize it's not personal. And you have to learn humility so that you're able to come across in a way that especially the difficult personnel decisions, people realize you're taking them not because it's not always because they're not necessarily performing well. It's sometimes it's just an issue of fit. But to be honest, it takes courage and a lot of personal psyching oneself up sometimes to have those difficult meetings. But you have to face it. You have to put yourself in it. You have to look people in the eye, and you have to speak to them honestly when you're saying the hard things. And afterwards, sometimes you just feel sad, upset, small, broken, whatever it is. You deal with those feelings, and you learn how. I work through the difficult moments with music. Yes.
Interesting.
I learned to love music at a small age. You asked about what growing up was like. That was one of the things. My parents were always playing music, but they were playing everything. They were playing high life, they were playing classical, they were playing jazz, they were playing pop. In my house, we loved Michael Jackson. We also loved Mahalia Jackson. We loved Chopin and Schubert and Schumann and Handel and Brahms and Bach and Mendelssohn, and we loved Konimo. So I learned to use different types of music to feed my soul in those hungry moments where you're just struggling and you just feel like you're not standing on your feet and you just feel small, and just to find what music do I need right now to find the energy and to lift myself up. I play music in the morning, I play music on my way to work, I play music while I'm working, I play music sometimes while I'm sleeping. And sometimes it goes from, I'm talking about playing, it's more like listening, to also playing a bit of an instrument, even if you're not very competent, which I'm not. There are times when you actually sometimes need to create the music. Sometimes you need to bring it out, sometimes you need to take it in. But you have to deal with it.
Interesting. But that means you do spend some time playing the keyboard.
Not enough.
Not enough, huh? All right. We all wish we could do more. It's something I wish I could pick up one day. Let's dwell a little more on the corporate culture conversation. And the reason is that I spent some time just going through as many as I can find within the space of our country, corporate vision and mission statements, and assess whether I feel that at every touch point I have encountered the organization. It's quite disturbing an observation that it is probably below par, if I would match what an organization say they are to how I felt that vision and mission in my encounter with them. Where's the gap? And how did we come by that missing link? How is it we're unable to make the words on the plaque translate into how people feel about the brand?
That's excellent, and we're lucky to have not had that challenge in Roncat, but it was through some strong mentoring. And I'll single out on this particular note among our first board members on this, John Inkum and Patrick Ewa. Now, if you rush to express and fix your corporate mission, vision, core values, you may get lucky, or you may end up expressing something that's not lasting. So the first challenge is understanding why you must have them, and what the difference is between, you know, your underlying principles, your purpose, your vision, your mission, your core values. They are different instruments, right? They're different things, and they have different durations, and they have different reasons why you need them and what they mean. So one thing is spending a lot of time understanding what those different things are, not mixing them up. And mission and vision are not the same thing. Goals and objectives are not the same thing. Interim objectives are not the same as long-term goals. Big, hairy, audacious goals are not the same as your quarterly targets. So these things are different things. They're related, and you have to understand them and then map them together and then embark on a deliberate journey to define them. And for us, it was a deliberate so where we started out, my co-founder and I, in defining what we wanted to do, at that point we hadn't very clearly expressed them in the form of a formal vision and mission. It was in about 2009, about 7 years after our initial incorporation starting business, where we went through a lengthier process to express them clearly, so that as we were growing the organization, new people coming in could take these and embrace them. I often like to quote Habakkuk 2:2 on this: make the vision plain, write on tablets, that he that readeth it may run with it. And that's the key. You want others to run with it. So one of the key principles is create something that others can run with beyond you if you want to create a lasting organization.
Talking about creating a lasting organization and people running with stuff, Ghanaian businesses tend to die off when the vision bearers or those who started it either turn their eye away from it, or they move on, or they pass away. 50 years from now, what will Roncat be like? Will that culture persist?
I believe it will. And I take my learnings right from Scripture, right? So Jesus is leaving and he gives the Great Commission and these clear instructions. But you can also jump right into Genesis when God instructs man, right? In terms of what we should go out, increase, multiply, have dominion, replenish. Those are very, very clear instructions, right? You see there a mission. So I think it's about giving the mission to the people who you want to take it off and go, and not. So you have to give it to them, and then you have to test whether they've embraced it, they've understood it, and embraced it. And probably the best test is to transition while you don't have to, at a point at which you don't have to. So one of the people I have been able to, I have role models, people I've never met but I've read their books and learned from, right? So your Bill Gates and stuff, growing up, and I've read deeply, right? So not just admiring them from afar, but understanding how they built these entities. I did that with Microsoft, Intel, Dell, Sony while I was still in engineering school. Read the books, studied them, and then tracked them on Wall Street. I used to watch CNN, FNC, NBC, and really see how are they performing. I even borrowed money from my father and bought their stocks and traded them online when I was still in school. But giving the mission to them means moving on and being able to watch them handle it. So I've had the privilege of watching fairly close up Ken Oforiatta together with Kelly Gadjekpo and Yofi Grant moving on from Databank while they're still by Ghanaian standards in their prime. I had the privilege of being close enough to Ken for him to have told me directly that they were going to do that. I remember where we were when he told me that. And then being able to watch over years them not just doing it once at a go, abruptly, disruptively, no, but doing it gradually. And then being able to watch them move on and continue in their own personal lives and careers to grow. When you have the opportunity to hear and watch, something that you are going to need to learn from and do later, close hand, first hand, question it, see it, then you don't have an excuse. So I'm hoping that I can even transition on at an even earlier stage from Roncat as it's continuing to grow, and while still being a young man, continue to watch it grow way beyond, and yet watch it grow in alignment with its vision and mission, because that's what you're looking for. You're not really, especially being a visionary, looking to see it become something entirely different from what the underlying purpose is, but to see it grow beyond what you left it, totally beyond, where it's going to go through a couple of evolutions, which means it may look fairly different, but still delivering on its vision going towards what, in our case, to be the mobile platform of choice of the world's leading brands. And the mission will have to evolve to get towards the vision. That's the relationship between the vision and the mission. The core values, those can't change. For us, excellence, integrity, reliability, those can't change. You just have to see a constant evolution of how you are exemplifying those core values, and then a periodic refinement of the mission towards achieving and attaining the vision. That's what, and I think the most beautiful thing will be to be young, happy and healthy and be able to sit back and watch others take that forward. But I think you have to give others the mission to do that.
In a moment, we will look at our education, what technology can do to enhance it, and the evolution of the software space in Ghana compared to what's happening around us in this very hyper-globalized world, if I could call it that. But still and finally, on the issue of culture, succession, and ensuring that you build a long-lasting legacy. Let's borrow from your experience at Dell. Did you at any point in time feel that the Dell you worked in would be a different Dell today if you compared the time, even though times have changed? And this is in relation to the idea of your core values remaining unchanged, but striking a very sound balance between that and the changing times, which will then affect your mission and then the vision.
That's a good question. I worked at Dell just barely under a year and then moved back to Ghana. But I learned a tremendous amount. Well, I learned a lot about the company before going to work, and then I learned a tremendous depth of amount while I was there. So Dell was a super collaborator in the industry. That's something I've learned. And so I've learned to be very active in our industry. I've been a member of Wireless Application Service Providers Association of Nigeria, SIM of Ghana, WASPAG, together with a number of other technology leaders. We're currently putting together a chamber of technology to see how we can be more collaborative about defining forward impact for the country, as well as how we all grow. And I learned that practically my first year working at Dell, sitting with very senior people in deep, intimate conferences with people from Siemens, competitors, IBM, and it's like, oh, is it like really like this? You guys really sit together and talk. They not only talked, they planned. They designed the roadmap of technology 5-10 years ahead together. And it baffled me. I thought you're supposed to be competing, hiding what you intend to do from each other. And then I learned there are levels. There are certain things that only work when people come together. And then there are certain things that you go and do away apart. Mm-hmm. But if you want to build confidence for an industry to grow and expand, there's got to be significant cooperation and collaboration in the planning and in defining the roadmaps. Because for any significant technology to emerge and to be embraced by the market, no one entity will define and build all of it. It's going to be a lot of collaboration. So that's what I really learned at Dell, that these great devices we're putting up was mainly Dell on the outside, a little bit Intel on the inside, a little bit IBM on the inside, a little bit Samsung on the screen, a little bit the OEM manufacturer was making those keyboards, was making the memory components, and that Dell had to understand what it was best at. And Dell had chosen that. It was to not do, for them in particular, the original research and innovation that HP and Philips and IBM were doing, but to be the best at integrating best-of-breed technologies to bring out the most efficiently priced but high-quality devices for the industry. So they could compete on quality, but they could beat everybody on price, and they could do it at volume. And that's what Dell decided to spend their engineering resources on. And what I really learned there was you've got to pick what you can be the best at, and then if you extend what Jim Collins teaches in Good to Great about your 3 intersecting circles and the hedgehog concept, combine what you can be the best in the world at with what you're really passionate about, and how it can make you money. If you think about those 3 intersecting circles. It's not only the companies we admire most, it's your Cristiano Ronaldo's and Lionel Messi's. You realize they actually enjoy their football. They're passionate about it. They really work hard at it too. You can think of artists in music and in film and scientists whom we admire, and that's what companies should also attempt to be, right? Establish essentially a corporate DNA and then just keep extending on that.
Well, coming up, we'll learn a bit about technology and our environment and education. This is the Executive Lounge with me, Shirado. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge with me, Inshira Ado, and we're continuing our conversation with Kofi Dadzie, CEO, Roncat in Ghana. Kofi, very intriguing stuff, I must confess, but we often say that, well, technology is a game changer, and I'm super passionate about education. I'm sure you are too, considering the amount of time you spend trying to learn about things around you. Where do you see the opportunity for education and technology converging?
I think the convergence is here. The economics is right. So lots of the things that were more of science when we were in primary school, secondary school, growing up, and even in university, have now become a bit more commoditized. So let's look at it from this angle. Virtual reality, artificial intelligence. They are both old. Mm-hmm. They are very sexy terms in technology media now. And so they may appear as though, wow, these are the new latest things. No, they're very old. I mean, many years ago in computer engineering school, we were doing AI programming in Lisp. Robotics is not new. But what's nice is when the economics becomes right, so that things that were only available in large factories or in specialized labs are now available in our watches and in our phones and in our TVs and in our laptops, and are now the way by which we're interacting, and sometimes we don't even realize it. Virtual reality and applying it to education has a dependency in some cases on bandwidth. Not computing power, but bandwidth. And then the two usual things, content and applications. So sometimes something is there, the hardware can support, you have the hardware, but there's not enough content. If you remember when 3D started coming out, I mean, you can buy a 4,000 or 5,000 3D TV and put it in your home. Question would be whether are there enough movies? Is your
have in 3D?
That's right. Is your cable TV provider actually broadcasting anything in 3D? And so to make it relevant, sometimes it's even there, it's economic, but there is not the content for it. So education will need the content to take advantage of virtual reality, so that it can become pervasive. What do I mean? What I mean is that as the prices of the components that allow you to beam an image, a virtual representation of a real thing that's elsewhere, into a classroom in a remote area, if the bandwidth is there, then the bandwidth is largely there. Some of what's left is the market adapting what it's presenting. But to say the bandwidth isn't there, the last mile isn't there, even to rural areas in Ghana, is not consistent. Mm-hmm. It's there. It just needs to sort of be made more available. So you can imagine with the right camera, multi-camera configurations, you can beam an image into a room so that people who are there can interact with somebody who's not really there. Virtual reality, it's almost an oxymoron, right? And then for education, it means that if there's somebody who has specialized skills in teaching a particular subject and needs to demonstrate what they are teaching for the teaching to be effective, then you could put this in places where that person can be cheaply. It means you don't have to fly them at different times to the place for a short period of time and house them and then get them to disseminate the knowledge and the demonstration only at brief times. It means they can do it somewhere in a lab and it can be beamed simultaneously, multicast if you like in our regular parlance, with interaction. That's the key thing. That takes it a step beyond video conferencing. or video playback at a later date. And those are all useful. There are times when maybe you're going to be in your room and you just want to play something back on your phone by video and maybe stop and pause and capture something. But there are times when you need the person to be there, to be responding to you, and be demonstrating how the thing works with their hands. And in Lagos, I think last August, when Mark Zuckerberg visited, based on a previous interaction with him in April, I was invited to be there. So I was sitting fairly close to him, and he was trying to explain how virtual reality will allow people to interact more seamlessly remotely, or more interactively, and yet not be in the same place. So he and I did a simulation of playing chess. But the idea was to say I could have been somewhere else. It would have been the same chessboard. He could have been somewhere entirely differently geographically. But if we had a virtual reality interface, we could literally be moving those chess pieces in real time and seeing each other, or seeing a virtual representation of each other as though we were in the same room. So just think of it this way. Communication and transportation can become very different when the technology to do it virtually presents itself in a commoditized way so that lots more people can engage it. For education, it's going to mean that the best teachers, the best tools, the best lab equipment, the best things you use to demonstrate can become available to smart kids wherever they are, regardless of what they have access to immediately. You won't have to go to Harvard and MIT to have the best instruction.
And it could even have a knock-on effect on how much we spend on infrastructure.
Hopefully.
Because you could study from anywhere.
Absolutely.
Interesting thought. The market, the ICT, or let's stick to software. We've got people doing some great stuff here on the continent and here in Ghana. Is the life of a software developer pretty much the same as a software developer, say, in India or in Silicon Valley? You know, these guys make lots of zeros on the end of their income. Why the disparity, and will we ever catch up?
I think we've caught up. We just need to start acting it. I don't think there's any excuse anymore for a software developer who is willing to patiently go through the ideation process to not be able to compete globally, whether they are in Kumasi or in Takoradi, versus if they are in Taiwan or in San Francisco. Maybe where we are left with the remaining gap will be attitude. And what I mean by attitude is the willingness to think differently. That's all I mean by attitude. Maybe it isn't even the right word. Because the tools are now all present. A software developer in Takoradi can deploy an app they built to the Google Play Store, the Apple iStore, quite as much as somebody in Taiwan or Singapore or in Europe or in the States could. There are almost no significant barriers remaining to a good idea, and that's the challenge. It's no longer about access to the tools or the platforms. Google will price your app, whether it's built in Singapore or in Sunyani, in cedis to a Ghanaian with an app in Ghana, and in Singapore, dollars to a Singaporean there. I mean, if it's limited geographically, it's because you say don't display this elsewhere. But otherwise, everybody will have access to it. The question is the idea good enough? Are we willing to be patient with what it takes to develop and refine an idea so that it's good enough? And that's a challenge for everyone. That's why there aren't 100 Mark Zuckerbergs even in the United States at any given point in time. It's as difficult there to build a Facebook as it is anywhere else. It's more about the patience. Yes, there are some differences in the infrastructure, but in Ashesi University, what Patrick and his team are instilling in the kids there is a can-do spirit. That's why I think all that's remaining, the only significant barrier remaining, we can come up with lots of other barriers, so I'm trying to emphasize on the word significant. The only significant barrier remaining is for us to feel the permission to not be limited or restrained in our thinking in terms of, I believe I can do it, so I will invest in the time and the effort and the process to actually try and put together and refine an idea that could go global. Yes, be locally relevant in terms of testing whether your idea is good. But remember that your brother or your friend, your roommate, your classmate you're testing the idea with is using global products. They're probably wearing a watch that is made by Apple or Samsung gear. They're probably wearing Samsung gear watch. They're probably using an A5 or S7 phone as it were. You're all watching a TV that's the same LED flat screen 3 that other people in the world have. So we're all testing and tasting global products every day. So why wouldn't you try also, if you're going to make something, to make it globally relevant? Because you're going to have to compete with global, with other products that are of a world-class nature in your local market, right? So then if you're trying to create a product, then from the start, from the scratch, from the ideation process, design it as though you're doing it for a global audience. If we can just make that shift, then I don't think there are any other significant barriers remaining to a kid in Sunyani who wants to compete with a kid in Singapore.
Collaboration was a big thing at Dell, or still is a big thing at Dell, and you talked about it. Do you think that offers any interesting opportunities for us in that space?
Collaboration is also an attitude. You've got to believe that other people's inputs are valuable, to invite them to collaborate, and for you to invest in what it takes to get value out of collaboration. Collaboration can be difficult. To get people to sit together, share value, and trust that they can all gain from it. So sometimes collaboration needs some learning, some structure. And I think those of us who are in the executive suite need to demonstrate it. We need to demonstrate it within our organizations. Don't hog things to yourself. Show people that by sharing and exchanging ideas, we all get more. And build the culture of collaboration. And then the next generation of leaders will embody it and will start doing it. I mean, at some point in your business life, you do learn that you need to start collaborating with other companies in your industry. And we see it. It's here in Ghana. We're a pretty pluralistic society. There are associations of everything. We just need to keep pushing them to the point where they start yielding some real value.
A few final questions, all too soon. We're coming to the end of the conversation, but it'll be interesting to find out. You talked about listening to music as a child, and you still do that and try to play the instrument. What other stuff would you add to that list of pastimes?
Oh, my own. I talked about my sisters being bookworms and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother being one. So I adopted the habit a little later, and I've come to love reading, but particularly my sisters liked spy novels. Everything from the famous 5 to your Agatha Christie and Alfred Hitchcocks is what they use, and then the Robert Ludlums and Frederick Fawcett's and Jeffrey Archer's and Tom Clancy's. So I went a bit through that, but I think what I fell in love with and I've fallen in love with is ancient military history.
Wow.
So I just anything that takes you into the depth. So I do a lot of what's called historical fiction. I carefully pick authors who've studied the history and gotten the history right. So who've actually read Herodotus's work and then have gotten the characters right, and then you fill in the blanks and then make a story out of it so it's readable. So I love learning from the generals. Hannibal, Scipio Africanus, by the way, he's the Roman general who finally defeated Hannibal. Definitely Julius Caesar, who, by the way, was constantly studying Alexander the Great and Scipio Africanus and Hannibal, right? So all the way down to Wellington, who finally defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. He was also a studier, constantly studying all the generals before him. In fact, Julius Caesar used to carry a chest of scrolls into the field, so that when he was determining the strategy for tomorrow's battle, he was trying to figure out which of Alexander the Great's battles looks like this one. So I just love getting strategy in a comfortable manner through reading from these generals who are always underdogs, by the way, and yet never considered defeat an option, and so would muster the will to find a way to win, and constantly won. In fact, most of these generals I've mentioned, never really lost a battle and fought many. Wellington never really lost a battle. What's the lesson there for me? It's that it's twofold. It's related to something my mother used to throw at me when I was a kid. Come back home with your report card. Mommy, I was first. And she's like, why weren't you half? It's like, come on, you should be praising me. Well, the lesson really is, when you win one battle, you really just won the right to win another. And that's how you want to look at life. Your last win is only a privilege to go for the next challenge, the next battle. And that's how you want to keep stepping through life. Because the next battle is going to be on a larger stage. You will have more resources. You will have more money. You will have a larger team. You will have bigger customers. Your competition will be scarier. You're supposed to use the last battle. Like when David before Goliath says, I've done the lion, I've done the bear. And if you look at the description of Goliath, first of all, he's a human being, right? So he has better thinking abilities than a bear and a lion.
That's right.
He's wearing armor. He's a trained warrior. He's got his javelin, his shield, and everything. Right? So he wasn't exactly the lion or the bear.
That's right.
But David takes those battles he's won and extends it to this next one. And that's what I think I'm finding enjoyable about reading about the generals in scripture and looking at the contemporary history generals and looking at why it is that as an underdog, David was the underdog to Goliath, they could keep winning. You know, and I find that very enjoyable. So I do a lot of that. I also find enjoyable learning from my kids.
Okay.
They are the new, together with my wife and kids, they are my new smarter cohort I like to engage with. So at work, yes, my managers, you know, both those who are execs with me, the next level of managers, I have people who I always say, look, if we did an IQ test, you guys would all score much higher than me, you know, and I enjoy that at work. I enjoy it at home also. I mean, sometimes you have to admit as a parent, these kids are smarter than you are, and not be shy about it, and add that to the joy of learning. And for me, as a person, as a person of faith, as a person of business, as a person of family, the joy of learning is probably what's my theme. That's probably what I want my life to be about. Just keep this joy of learning going. Don't stop at any point.
Well, on that joyous note, I'd like to say how much it's been fun talking to you, and we're grateful for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
This has been another edition of the Executive Lounge with me, Inshirado. And 5 things I like to always take away from our conversations is, first off, develop a can-do spirit and surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. Be grounded in faith and seek knowledge. Just learn to learn and keep learning. And finally, always remember that when you've done it, it's only an opportunity so you can do it all over again, except this time it's going to be a little harder. But with the can-do spirit, who's going to stop you? My name is Inshira Adam. Go forward, make rain. Shalom.
The Executive